Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Nic Barlage. Here's something you might want to know about Nic. He sent out 172 applications his senior year of college and got 172 denials. He's now the CEO of the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're going to love this episode, especially if you're at a time in your life where you're thinking about retaining and attracting talent and the mindset of a leader to get you there. You'll also hear some cool basketball stuff. Nic Barlage, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. So excited you're here. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I feel humbled and honored to be able to do this. I look at and look up to a lot of people across the industries that you all represent. So excited to spend a little bit of time together.
Yeah, I'm super excited with you too. First of all, congratulations on, at least as we're recording this today, pretty good career for the season for the Cavs this year. So good job keeping it going. I'm an Ohio guy too, and a lot of times Cincinnati and Cleveland we have rivalry, but not with the NBA. So we only got one team.
Yeah, absolutely. We try to be Ohio's team, and we've been very fortunate. We've got a great group of guys and great group of guys and gals on and off the court as well. And so we've got we're really excited about not only what we've done so far, but I think more importantly what's in front of us.
I want to learn a little bit about how you got where you are, but first, anytime I think, especially folks like in the sports world or the entertainment world, it's something a lot of us outside of your world can be fascinated by, the world you live in. I think most of us maybe have a handle on maybe what a head coach does at a professional team. But as you're the CEO of the Cleveland Cavaliers, could you kind of tell us what does that mean? What are you really doing every day? What do you spend your time doing? So that we can just kind of have an understanding of it's probably the magnitude of your job that maybe we don't initially understand,
Yeah, look, I'll kind of share my own personal version, if you will, and then I'll say maybe more for the folks that are just curious, maybe we're more the tactical version. Personally, I look at my position as a position that literally, Joe's at the bottom of the org chart, really supporting our entire organization and first and foremost, trying to establish a culture and an environment that puts people in a position to be successful at the end of the day and really to grow and accomplish not just their professional goals, but their personal goals. I think that blend and having that type of symbiotic relationship with our team members is really important. And so from that perspective, I think it's things that I try to stay super focused and super connected within the various, verticals and segments of our business. But most importantly with our team members, because I think that's really ultimately at the end of the day, they're the heartbeat of what we do. And I may be tasked with making a hard decision here or there or guiding the group in a certain direction. But really, at the end of the day, it's the aggregation of everybody coming together to create outcomes for our community and to create outcomes within the four walls of Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And so that's kind of how I philosophically look at it. I'd say tactically, my role is really focused on any aspect of the business. So anything from finance and people and culture all the way through to sales and marketing and operating our facilities. And really the business nature of it. And so we have an incredible basketball group led by our president of basketball operations and Kobe Altman, our head coach, JB Bickerstaff. They're really focused on the team operations and what you see on the playing surface. But we have a whole business group that really is focused on how we serve our community, how we serve our industry, ultimately how we curate a world-class fan experience, how we attract events to Northeast Ohio. And then we have an entertainment group called Rock Entertainment that is really focused on how we diversify ourselves. So we have a minor league hockey team. We have a G League team. We've got two interests in esports. And then we have some sales and marketing execution agreements with the tennis tournament and with the USFL that we engage with as well. And that part of our business, that portfolio part of our business is growing. It feels like daily. But so that's a little bit of kind of end to end in regards to, like I said, the philosophical and then the tactical day-to-day.
I love it. I think I mostly kind of understand now. It sounds like I'm a CEO of a smaller organization, but I understand that sometimes it's hard to know every day exactly what your role calls for. But it's very much in line with how we think about leadership here at LeaderCast, that you're ultimately there to serve the folks in your company and to help them succeed. So if we can now just kind of go back to early Nic back in the day, I'm curious, was sports a big deal to you as a kid, and had you sort of hoped to get into sports as a career, or was this one of those things that kind of surprised you along the way that you ended up working here?
Honestly, a little bit of both. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I played basketball in college for a few years, and I was actually started off as a pre-med major, and basically darn near failed out of it. My mind just didn't think that way. I wasn't, organic chemistry and biology, like as good as I was in high school, college was a whole crash course for me and realizing my intellectual strengths and weaknesses. And so I transitioned very quickly. And one of the things, I went through an exercise actually with a career counselor at the school I went to. And he basically said, like, what are you passionate about? And so I wrote down 3 things, and they were all sports. And so he's like, why don't you go work in sports? And I was like, well, that's a novel concept. I didn't even know that existed. And so I literally became, for the last 2.5 years of my college experience, became obsessed with how I kind of gained entry into this industry. I started off as an intern for a Northwoods League collegiate wood bat team in northern Minnesota. Did that for a summer, and then came back and was their assistant GM my senior year of college and into the summer that followed. Because I'd sent out, I say this story a lot, but I'd sent out 172 resumes my senior year of college and got 172 no's. Wow. And so I was kind of stuck, felt like I had some good work experience, felt like I would work hard, felt like I had good attitude, but I was kind of stuck. And so I kept applying, I kept going at it. And then finally was able to land a entry-level ticket sales job in Phoenix with the Suns and the Mercury right out of college. And then I just went to work. I think it took me so long to gain entry into the industry that once I did, I wasn't going to take my foot off the gas. And I had some pretty lofty goals I had set for myself. And that really what was kind of the impetus to the start of the journey.
It reminds me of something one of my mentors taught me early on, which was that your passion area often determines where you end up working, not necessarily what you end up doing. And using like American Idol, the early years of American Idol as an example, your passion might be music, but you should not be a singer. But you can work in the music industry. You want to be there. And I came out of the entertainment industry for a while in my life, and I saw that as well, that, some people just had such a passion for it. You kind of find your way within the area that you're passionate about, and it might not be being the point guard of the Cavaliers if you might have wanted to be that when you were 10 or 12 years old,
Right. I say this all the time to people that are trying to gain entry from college into, real world opportunities. I would say, let your passions dictate your experiences. Don't let what you experience dictate your passions. And I think what's important with that is, if you're passionate about something, you're going to have a vibrancy and a care for what you're doing, way more than if what you're doing, you try to create or fake a passion around it. And so for me, I also want to be clear, I think it's really important that you're not just passionate about a thing, but you're passionate about a craft. And so it could be, I think in our world, it could be finance, it could be legal, it could be operations, it could be sales, it could be marketing, but be passionate about that craft. Because it's easy to be passionate about a sports team, or it's easy to be passionate about something that you enjoy in your free time, but you really have to distill it into what that ultimate craft is or what that subject matter is, because the passion for the thing is a little easier than the passion for the craft. And I think people miss that, especially when they're trying to gain entry into our industry, because no different than anything else, once you settle into it and you're, 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, 2 years into it, it settles into your day job. And there's a grind that sets into it, and there's no utopia out there. And so I do think that passion piece is a really important part of the formula to find success.
Well, let's do the easy segue and tie that back into your story then. So as you enter your first job then in the area you want, did you know your craft that you were passionate about at that point, or was it a learning through time to kind of find what you would say is your craft?
I think you got to be a little bit, you got to be a little lucky, and you got to be a little, I always think it's like the convergence of hard work, luck, and the right attitude. And for me, growing up kind of as an athlete and having more of a commercial or a sales background in particular, it just fit me really well. It was a pretty competitive situation, where you're kind of constantly competing against each other, but you're part of an overall team. And so I settled into that very quickly, and I really enjoyed it. I loved meeting different people. I loved learning about different people. I loved building relationships with different people. And so I used every interaction I had as kind of a chance to observationally learn through a business leader or through somebody that I was working on a relationship with. And I think that really helped shorten my learning curve in a lot of ways, because I not only, when I would get in and talk to a prospect when I was selling, or talk to a business, like I really wanted to understand what they did, how they made money, what their culture was. I tried to be very kind of solution oriented in my approach, and I just became really passionate about it. I became passionate about the science of it, the art of it, and so as I started putting those things together and starting to find a little bit of success in it as well, it just kind of caught the bug and just kept building and building and building, and that's where I probably spent 10 of my 16 years in the business was really on the commercial side, growing and understanding it in many different ways, but also studying everything around it, because I really ultimately at the end of the day wanted to run a business. And so in order to do that, you've got to be multidimensional. You can't just be the hard charging salesperson every single day. You've got to really understand how all the forms and functions fit together. But it was a great opportunity, like I said, for me to get wider faster because of just the amount of people that I was engaging with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I wonder if it seems like there's two sorts of folks that end up with a job like yours. The guy in his early 20s that's like, yeah, I'm going to be the CEO of some NBA team. I'll just see which one wants me. That's sort of confident, like this is what I'm going to be. Versus the one that if we told when you were 23 or 24, this is going to be your job in this many years, would be pleasantly surprised. So I'm curious, as you think about your sort of your confidence, your direction. Which sort of were you, or were you somewhere in the middle?
I will say from the moment I started in the business, I wrote down, and I think this is also a very important exercise just in your own life journey, but I had wrote down 13 goals. And don't ask me why the number 13, it just turned out that was it. And I had them on a piece of notebook paper, and I taped them to my bathroom mirror. And every morning when I walked in, I looked at them. I was forced to look at them. It was probably better than looking at my face. And so when the very last goal was, and it wasn't by title, but it was just by experience, which I also think is a really important kind of delineation I learned early in my life. But my goal was to run the business side of a sports franchise someday. I wasn't obsessed with like what sport, to be honest, as much as I was just the function of really leading a business. And so I will say this. Once I made that commitment, I never wavered from it. I won't say I was overconfident. I wouldn't say I was like, I was cutthroat. It had to be this. It was just like I was contrite and determined to make sure that was an outcome that I was able to drive towards in my career. Now, I will say, due to mentors and other people, especially our chairman, Dan Gilbert, and other people in my journey, it came a little bit faster than I anticipated. But I do think that a lot of that stemmed from hard work and commitment and all the right things. I think at the end of the day, focused and coming together with timing and opportunity for sure. But I will say it was the goal from the very beginning. And I wasn't going to waver until I got to it.
I love that. We sent you some questions before that sometimes I ask people and sometimes I forget, but I like to couch these conversations as much as I can, and kind of, we're all living out a great story, and all stories sort of have sort of plot points that hit along the way. And one of the things I love to talk about is in all the great myths, like ancient myths, it's usually a dragon or a monster comes in and like gets in our way. So in your story, you want to be this, and we know now you're going to become that. But I'm curious, if you think about it that way, what was the biggest hurdle, the biggest dragon monster that maybe stood in your way that came the closest to stopping you to where you wanted to get? What did you have to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it probably was I kind of put it in two phases in my life, honestly. The first phase kind of pre-family, and then the second phase post-family, because my why has kind of evolved over time. I think the first phase was just like having the persistent patience in my own growth to understand that every part of the journey was leading you towards a developmental experience that created and prepared you for ultimately, doing a job like this. I think early on in my career, I was very impatient. I looked at every job posting like, I could do that. Why don't I go do that right now? And as I got, you call it wiser with years or whatever the case may be, is I understood that it was much more important that every experience I went through, I was learning from and I was developing myself around, as opposed to just focused on what was next. And so that was early on. And then I think as I transitioned into more of kind of a broader scale of leadership, it became once more of a patience of understanding that, people are all wired a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And what makes a marketing person successful is different than what makes a salesperson successful, is different than what makes a finance person successful, different is what makes a building operations team member successful. And so their motivations are different. And so your leadership and management style, it shouldn't be compromised based off of the value set and the integrity that you set, but it should be prescriptive to those individuals, because everyone's going to approach those things differently and they're going to be motivated by a different set of stimulation. And so for me, it was really important to kind of be able to become a chameleon of sorts to the different business interests that were out there. And I really it didn't take me a long time to learn those things, but it was definitely something I spent a lot of time self-reflecting on, and a lot of time, and I still do, a lot of time just really understanding, okay, how can I be better in this vertical? How can I be better in that vertical of the business? Because at the end of the day, they're all a little bit different. Yeah. And people are all a little bit different. And so it was important to mature and evolve in that way.
Can we do a little leadership role play here? Because I'm curious now, as I'm sure there are lots of younger, impassioned leaders on your team now that probably you see yourself in terms of their impatience to want to get where they want to go. I'm curious, as that was part of your story, how do you lead folks like that, where maybe you see their potential and you love their passion, but when you're leading someone that's just a little impatient, have you learned any hacks or tricks for us as leaders to help those folks get to the next level?
Look, first of all, I think you embrace that passion, and I think you embrace that gear that they have to grow. I don't think you try to minimize it. I don't think you try to tamp it down. I think you let them know that, look, this is rare. This is a rare combination of, you've got the acumen, you've got the intelligence, you've got the motivation, you've got the work ethic, you've got the perspective. Like, don't ever lose that, So I think you have to really embrace it. I think the other piece of that is, you should really get to a deeper personal relationship with those people. I really think, especially within the folks that I work directly with a lot here, I try to get to a really personal level with them. I want to understand their families. I want to understand, beyond what happens in our four walls, so that they know that there's a genuine care about the individual. And then I think the last piece is, and I always swore to myself at every level of leadership that I've been in, is that I would be progressive and proactive with their careers. And so, I think a lot of times us as leaders, if we don't maybe have the linear answer to somebody in their career, we try to kick that conversation down the hall. We try to kick that can down the hall. And I think we should embrace it. I think we should talk about it. Like, hey, look, if you are somebody that's running a part of our business right now, but you want to take a wider lens to it, I'll invite them in. I'll walk them through how we prepare for a board meeting or a quarterly business review. I will go through the whole deck with them in person to let them know how I'm looking at it. I'll sit down, if I'll just use the finance area of the business as an area of the business that they may not have as much sightlines to. I'll walk them through how we structure things and how we look at things. So you give them kind of a seat at the table / a little bit of a look behind the curtain to help their own development. Because at the end of the day, I want to create, 15 CEOs or 15 presidents of teams that come from here. And I embrace that in their development journey. And look, some of them you may lose from time to time to go run their own thing. But I look at that as a sign of strength to our business and a sign of strength to our culture, that we're developing and breeding that next generation of leaders. And so I think going back to it succinctly is you embrace it, you develop it, and you get it ready for when that opportunity comes for them, because we were all invested in at that point, in some point in our lives, by others to help us get to these levels of leadership. And so I really don't think you really have to just thoroughly try to help them and guide them and push them. And I think they respect that even more. And you develop, last point is, you develop even a stronger bond and a stronger affinity. And so they trust your recommendation. So when that C-level job rolls across their desk, you can tell them, hey, look, this, you need to go do this. Or, you know what, culturally, this one may not make sense for you based on how you've grown up in the business. And so you might want to think a little bit longer than that. And the thing I've noticed in that approach is the money and the numbers get left at the door, and they really make a qualitative decision for the betterment of their career and the betterment of their development. And I think that's an invaluable piece.
I love that so much. It's been interesting. I told you we rebooted this podcast after COVID 4 or 5 months ago, and I've been lucky to have 25, 30 conversations with some great leaders like you. What's been fascinating are the themes that have developed just from me doing this podcast for 5 months. And what probably every fourth person I've talked to has said something like what you just said, which is my words, like, my job as a leader is almost a career coach for everyone I lead. And I would love for them to stay with me, but I'm not going to coach them any worse, or I'm not going to be, it's okay if they do leave because that's their path. Whereas I think there is, if we speak candidly sometimes, especially in a culture that's so sort of, when we had what they were calling like the talent crisis in the last year, and just this kind of fear that can live in leaders of, I'm going to lose all my talent if I develop them, even subconsciously. We think that. But I've never had anyone say that your goal is almost, it's like the Bill Belichick or coaching tree kind of thing, right? Like, it would be great if all these leaders came out of my organization, and instead of a fear, you've almost set it up as a goal or a point of pride in your culture.
Yeah, I would even say, even differently, is great leaders work every day to replace themselves. And I think that's so important. And, from my perspective, I embrace those things because it makes us better. It makes us more desirable for the next level of leader to then grow and ascend. Because, I tell people all the time, like, look, when you come here to Cleveland to work for the Cavaliers, to work for Rock Entertainment Group, our goal is that we develop you to not just leave here for the next incremental job opportunity, but to leave here to be a leader and to be a person of impact within our industry. And I think that's where you ultimately, people want to be a part of that, and they look at that like it's an investment in themselves. And so, it's just, I think it's really important. I also believe that, if you're doing the right thing, you never fear losing that person, because your culture lives beyond any one single person. It lives beyond me. It lives beyond anybody else that's within our group. And it just creates this kind of air of confidence, not arrogance, not overconfidence, but confidence that breeds sustainability within a business that I think is really vital for us as we think about things over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to believe we only have like 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure I value your time. I know you got a lot of things to do today. And hopefully we'll get you back on the LeaderCast platform one way or another. I'll start working on that. But I think the basketball nerds and the Cleveland Cavs fanatics who listen to this are going to want some basketball stories. So when you think of leadership as it applies to the Cavs or to the NBA or basketball, maybe on the court or coaches or front office, does anything come to mind if I would ask you, just tell me a story maybe from the last 3-4 years of basketball wise, some great leadership that you've seen?
Look, I would say the one that really stands out to me was it'll be 2 years ago now, this coming April, May. We were coming off of a very challenging season, COVID shortened season. It was the year after. So the NBA shut down, went to the bubble, and then came back in a COVID shortened season. And we didn't have a great year. we were a little, we were a little beat up. We didn't win very many games. But the resolve at the time that our general manager, Kobe Altman, had, and who's now our president of basketball operations, he had a plan. And his plan was a multi-year plan in order to how we rebuild this thing. And he kept saying, because Cleveland's a little different, right? Like, we're not Miami, we're not New York, we're not LA. Yeah. But he had this plan, and he always talks about wanting fountains, not wanting drains from a basketball perspective. And so he went out. They don't always think about this in the moment, but Kobe went out and got Lauri Markkanen, and then he went out and he drafted incredibly well that year. And next thing you know, I think we got Evan Mobley that summer, and we had Darius Garland, who was a little hurt his rookie year, coming back into form. And so as we entered the 21-22 season, I get my years merged together here. Sure. Nobody knew what to expect from us. Yeah. Nobody knew what we were going to be or what we were going to be about. And as we rounded the corner last year, right at this point, we were like the surprise of the NBA. And Darius was an all-star. Jared Allen was an all-star. Evan Mobley was a Rookie of the Year candidate. Probably, we think, should have won. Lost to a very, very good player in Scotty Barnes. But now all of a sudden we went from literally this moment in time less than a year ago where people thought we were kind of dead in the water, this rebuild that was going to last forever. But Kobe had a plan, and he went out and he started targeting that plan, even going back to the James Harden trade from Houston to Brooklyn when we were able to get Jared Allen for not very many assets. And so now all of a sudden we have this nucleus, and it's this really surprising nucleus that we took it to the limit in the playing game, almost got to the playoffs. And then we go through the summer and we have the opportunity to kind of hang around the rim and get a superstar player like Donovan Mitchell to really create just a catalytic moment for us. But I go back to Kobe's resolve as a leader. Kobe's resolve and the vision that he had and the plan that he had, which was laid out over a multi-year period of time. And he would tell you this, but some of those things come down to opportunity and not even to luck, but just being able to convert at the right point in time. I give him a lot of credit because he stood up to adversity. He stood up to a situation that was very challenging. There were some people that were calling for his job 2 years ago, and now he's got that last year and this year he'll be, if he doesn't win Executive of the Year, he'd be one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 vote getters from that perspective. And so I give him a lot of credit for having the confidence in himself, for having the confidence in our team, for having the confidence in our head coach, that he knew that we were the foundation he was laying, even while the world thought there was just a bunch of dysfunction and chaos going on. And now as we've gone through the last 2 years where we have this kind of ascension happening, it's something that he should be really proud of. I know it's something that we're really proud of as an organization. But I think sometimes it's said differently, it's never as bad as people may think it is, and it's never as good as people may think it is. Yeah. And you're probably not that far away from either one. And so I think that's a really important lesson I know I've learned in just watching him operate over the last couple of years.
I love it. I love you get to brag on him. That's amazing. And, what I take from that is the best leaders create a plan, have a plan, lead folks through that plan. And then you're in a situation where your job is to trust his plan and sort of almost air support, right? Make sure he has what he needs to pull that off. And you're doing it. And as an Ohio boy, I hope you win it all this year. I'm rooting for you.
We're not making any of those predictions, but we're very thankful for what we have, and we're very, like I said earlier, we're very excited about what's in front of us. We still got a lot left to prove, and we're very, but we have a lot of optimism for what we think the future will bring for Cleveland, for Northeast Ohio, for our community, and for our team. So we're looking forward to what's in the road ahead.
Nic, thank you so much for being a part of this. It's going to be helpful to a ton of people, and I really appreciate your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.